Currently, I've had my right eye socket recreated. I've had a nose prosthesis. Gosh, I've had over 30 surgeries.
Every October, we shine a light on domestic violence and the importance of awareness and education. Those are critical components of prevention.
That's right. I sat down with Carolyn Thomas, the woman without a face. Through the years, she has been one of the most outspoken survivors of domestic violence, admitting she made some life-altering mistakes and hoping that we can all learn from them. But before we begin this story, we have to warn you, the images you're about to see are graphic that you may find disturbing. But they are necessary in order for you to understand the ramifications of domestic violence. Here's her story.
Hi, how are you?
This is Carolyn Thomas, known as the woman without a face. She shot to stardom when her story was featured on shows like Larry King and The Oprah Winfrey Show. She's a miracle. She shouldn't be alive after one of the most horrific domestic violence incidents imaginable.
I couldn't believe I was alive. How is somebody alive with your right eye gone, your nose gone, your top lip gone, the whole left side of your face gone?
This is what she's talking about. She lost 80% of her face and so much more. It's been 21 years since that fateful day when her abusive ex-boyfriend, Terrence Kelly, tried to kill her.
Wake up 911.
Oh, Lord Jesus, we need police because I done shot off.
2003, December the 5th. It started an argument and a tussle that ended up in the closet, which is where I kept the .44 Magnum that he had. He got the gun. He shot my mom in the abdomen area. He drugged me into the living room and shot me in the face at point blank range. Well, next thing I know, when I wake up, I'm in the hospital in Temple, Texas.
Domestic violence touched Carolyn's life early on. She saw her mother battle through an unhealthy relationship with her father.
Screaming and yelling, maybe like pushing or shoving. It turned into a domestic violence relationship, and they ended up divorcing it when I was 5.
Her adolescent years were kinder. Her outgoing spirit led her to become a high school track star, and her friends always knew her to be a cheerful person. That all changed in 1992 when Terrence came into her life. She recalls when her mother and grandmother first met him.
My mom's impression of Terrence was that he was controlling, and my grandmother, she said he was crazy. I kind of thought to myself at 22, like, they don't have a clue of what they're talking about. I absolutely ignored him.
There were signs everywhere. Terrence was constantly in trouble with the law. He sold drugs and was even an alleged suspect in a capital murder case. He was also terribly insecure.
He was just jealous all the way around. Jealous of me talking to his friends, jealous of me talking to my male cousins. He was just jealous, period.
It started with just a slap. Eventually, years of turmoil and violence would follow.
Most of the time, he would apologize after the abuse. Most women of abuse, we already know how that goes, you know. Most of the time, they do it again.
And yet, she wouldn't leave him.
I had grew to love him, and I thought that, you know, I could change him. I learned later on down the road that you can't change anyone but yourself.
She learned that lesson too late. Not only did she lose her face, she lost her mother. Janice Reeves did not survive the gunshot. Walk me back through all those emotions when you found out that she didn't make it.
Finding out that she didn't make it was like one of the hardest things to hear. Just imagine trying to cry, but you can't because your jaws are wired. When people cry, we open our mouths, we cry out, we yell out, and just imagine not being able to do that and having to do that with your jaws wired. It was awful. Sorry about that.
It's okay. A key part of her struggle is the guilt.
I dealt with that fact that if I had never said, it's okay to come over to the apartment, for years and years and years.
She tells me it took all the strength in the world to grieve her mother, while spending 6 months trying to stay alive and wondering what's next for the woman without a face.
I would say to that young Carolyn that you should have listened. If I had just listened to my mom, to my grandmother, if I had just listened, I wouldn't be here telling this story now.
Carolyn Thomas survived the unimaginable, but deals with deep regret every single day. 21 years after surviving the most horrific domestic violence experience imaginable, she eclipses the regret with steadfast courage. She's now a fierce advocate for women who could be headed down the same path she was on.
I knew I was left to, I'm so sorry, to save lives. And so that's been my mission ever since.
She's learned to channel all that pain and anguish using her deeply personal experience for a greater good.
I lost a whole lot, staying in that relationship. And that's why I travel, why I try to motivate young women and to get out of there. Because worse off than me, you're gonna be 6 foot under.
She calls her mission Voices for All, the Carolyn Thomas Foundation, a nonprofit she founded in 2006 that supports victims and survivors of domestic violence. She's more than talk. This is her Woman Save Yourself 2024 self-defense class, led by certified martial arts instructor Bruce Wynn, that empowers survivors with physical safety techniques on how they can effectively protect themselves.
Block and grab. You taking that knife, okay?
With this training, Carolyn may have been able to disarm her attacker. These techniques could be life and death situations.
These techniques, definitely, they could be life and death. He did show me a technique where I could have gotten the gun away from my temple.
She tells me it's not only important to be physically prepared, but strategically as well. A hard lesson she learned when trying to leave her ex-boyfriend, Terrence Kelly.
I told him, with the words that are coming out my mouth, I don't want to be in a relationship with you anymore.
So do you think those words were dangerous to say?
Those words were dangerous. There should have been a safety plan set in place for my mother and I, and as well as my family.
Words of wisdom from someone who has learned some tough lessons.
I could do it. I could do it. This is Princess Carly. She's an emotional support dog.
But being physically prepared is only one part of the healing process for Carolyn. Part of her struggle over the years has been with anxiety and depression.
It was a rough road, finding out who I am again. I'll never go back to the Carolyn that I was before I got shot.
Can you imagine going through 30 reconstructive surgeries to create a new face, including skin grafts, a new right eye socket, jawbone, and nose prosthesis? That's what a single bullet from a .44 Magnum will do, but she's finding her way back. Do you feel beautiful again?
Oh yeah, I feel beautiful again. To be honest, it took me 17 years. I think I'm extraordinary. I'm different.
And you take pride in that.
I take pride in being different.
This magnificent woman, beautiful on the inside and out, her hopes and dreams intact.
I do in the future hope that I do find true love, as somebody that loves me for me.
But right now, she's focused on being there for others the moment they need it, creating Carolyn's House, a refuge for women in danger.
Just in case somebody might need a place to stay for a little while. But yeah, that dream house is decked out. It's gonna look more purpler than Prince's Purple Palace.
While none of this will bring her mother back, she finds a way to fight through the loss.
If I could change one thing about the whole thing, I would change losing her. But I wouldn't change what I have went through because it made me the person that I am today.
That person is delivering a powerful truth, a bottom line. If you're in an abusive relationship, you have to come to terms with the reality of your situation before it's too late.
The abuser says to us, I love you, I'm going to change. But they're not. They're not going to change. They're going to hit you again. It may not be tomorrow. It may not be next week. But it's going to happen again and again and again. That's not love at all.
I sat down with Kermit Graham, the Waco PD officer who found Carolyn laying nearly lifeless on the ground, hanging on for dear life. He tells me about their unbreakable bond and opens up about his own tragic story. This is retired Waco PD officer Kermit Graham. He found Carolyn Thomas that horrible day when she was shot in the face by her ex-boyfriend, Terrence Kelly.
I remember my mom coming out of the room saying something, and pow, he shot her in the stomach. I was taken into the living room and shot in the face at point blank range.
Carolyn's words are one thing, but I have to warn you, what Officer Graham found goes far beyond what words can describe.
It looked like her face had exploded from the inside out and stuff was hanging.
It's a day he'll never forget. He walks me through what he saw that day, describing every detail of the crime scene.
First thing I saw was a blood trail coming down the stairwell. Second thing I saw was Carolyn's mother. When I looked at her, I didn't see where she was going to make it. And the last thing she said was, "Did my daughter get out?"
When Kermit made his way through the door of the apartment Carolyn and her mother shared, he was in disbelief.
Carolyn laying face down on the floor. I could see blood coming from her face.
He thought she was already dead.
All I saw was a portion of her face missing, a wound that I had never seen anyone survive, but she actually raised up. She tried to reach for my leg and I kind of jumped because I was thinking couldn't be alive.
But this is the very moment we discover Carolyn's incredible strength and resilience, fighting through the destructive force of a .44 Magnum at point-blank range.
And there was a coffee table with a vase of flowers on it, and I remember seeing what looked to me to be someone's nostril next to the bedroom that I just searched. It looked like teeth.
More than 2 decades later, Kermit and Carolyn have remained friends. He's in awe of all the advocacy work she's done to prevent others from falling victim to domestic violence.
I think it's outstanding military term.
Like here at the 35th Annual Texas Crime Stoppers Conference in Waco.
Then I had those young ladies that said, you know, just because that happened to you doesn't mean it's going to happen to me. And those are the ladies, those are the group of ladies and young women that we've got to reach out to.
As she continues to share her story, chillingly, their connection goes far deeper than officer and survivor. Graham is dealing with a deep sadness as well. Is there a special bond there between the two of you?
The special bond is, in 2010, my son was killed.
Domestic violence affects both women and men. Ashley Gerard Graham, Kermit's son, was only 28 years old, shot to death at the hands of his ex-girlfriend's new lover. And much like Carolyn, he can't help but look at himself as part of the blame.
I blame myself. As a parent, I felt like I did something wrong.
Why do you think that you blamed yourself?
I didn't want to get involved. Instead of telling him what I thought, I accepted the fact that he was a grown man.
If you had to go back again, would you have spoken up?
Yes, I would have.
And now, just like Carolyn, he does the work of sharing his story in hopes that it'll resonate and reach those who need it most.
The signs are there. It starts out most of the time arguing, then grabbing, then slapping. You have to be willing to accept the help. Humble yourself. Let's go down to the counselor. Let's go down to the shelter and talk to somebody.
Despite years of counseling for both Kermit and Carolyn, the scars of losing their loved ones will never fade. Their hope now is to share their stories, honestly, preventing future tragedies.
Sometimes the choices that we make in life are not the right choices. The best thing we can do is to figure out how to correct it and how we can help others not make the same mistake that we made.
And taking it one day at a time as they cope with their own heartbreak the best way they can.
He's with my father and my grandfather, my grandmothers. He's in good hands. I'll see him again. And we're gonna keep going until that time.
Domestic violence can tear families apart, and we can all do our part to break that cycle.